This week on Animal Miracles, one man has to decide whether to have the infected leg of his beloved dog amputated.
I didn't want to see her suffer, so I really honestly thought about putting her down. At the same time, that was a tough decision.
Then, on a hunting trip, he capsizes into a freezing river and is washed towards the open ocean. Will his faithful hunting dog be there to save him?
Yeah! Yeah!
Then, when the family dog finds a deadly serpent in this family's suburban paradise, it's a life and death battle to save the children.
I guess you'd almost have to picture a dance, so to speak. I would strike and it would lunge.
I thought something bad, really bad was gonna happen.
Mom, come inside! All right, get back in the house, now!
But first, a garage burns, and a stray cat's kittens are trapped inside. Will their mother race through the flames to save them?
Her in and out 5 times, every time, getting burnt more and more. I can't even describe, how it would be to do something like that.
Will she succeed? And at what painful price? These stories and more, next on Animal Miracles.
There are thousands of abandoned cats living in towns and cities across North America. Known as feral cats, they forage for food, and they struggle to overcome tremendous odds to survive in our hostile world. Scarlett, as she has come to be known, was a tenacious mother cat who fought to save her family and who changed the lives of all who knew her. This is her story. Nothing is more destructive than fire. Imagine how terrifying it would be for a mother cat whose kittens are trapped inside. When Dave Gianelli responded to a call in the winter of 1996, he and the other firefighters came prepared for whatever life and death drama might unfold. But what they found at this fire would move even the toughest of men.
We responded to what we knew was a working fire at that point. And when we arrived at the scene, we had seen a vacant garage fully involved with fire.
On this night in Brooklyn, New York, as the firefighters set up, a litter of kittens lay helpless inside the inferno. There was only the smallest hope, as their mother, willing to sacrifice her own life, fought to save them.
2 companies were on the scene already, and all of their members were getting off. And as I was getting off, I heard kittens crying. And I said, Jimmy, did you hear that? And he says, yeah, but I don't know where that's coming from.
Over and over again, the mother raced through the flames to bring the kittens to safety. And when Dave Gianelli returned to the fire truck, he heard the plaintive cries again.
So I zoned in on where the noise was coming from.
Did you hear that?
And I happened to see 3 little kittens right in smoke to the side of the garage door opening. 3 of them were huddled together, obviously afraid. They were burnt, they were in pain.
Somebody get me a box!
Clearly, there was a devoted mother cat who had somehow braved the fire.
I went back into the front of the building where the members were working, and I said, I still hear cats crying somewhere.
This time, the sound was coming from the other side of the street.
As I walked towards that area, there was a gray kitten, and there was another kitten on the curb. So now I have 5 kittens.
But Dave still couldn't see the mother, though he now realized what must have happened.
She moved them out of the building one by one. And then she must have just ran out of energy. And she just decided to crawl off and probably die at that point.
Dave searched for the wounded mother. He knew her kittens needed her.
Walking through a bunch of debris, I happened to see a cat that was severely burned. I just picked her up real gently, and I held her close to me. She cried in pain. She had second and third degree burns, you know, throughout her face and on her stomach and her paws. I mean, I felt so bad for her. I just wanted to reunite her with her kittens.
Gently, Dave carried the dying mother to her babies.
What she did at that moment really got to me. Even though she was unable to probably see at that point because her face was all burnt, and I don't know how she was even able to smell because her nose was all just about burnt off. She went around and licked every one of her kittens, and as if to say, all right, I have them back again.
Once the blaze was under control, Dave turned his attention to his foundlings and wondered if there was any hope. He called the North Shore Animal League, a shelter and hospital for abused and abandoned animals, and spoke to his friend, Marge Stein.
Hey, Marge, I've got a mother cat here and 5 kittens. They're pretty badly burned. We're on our way.
Dave arrived at the medical center with the cat and these tiny little kittens. In my heart, I didn't think that that mother cat would ever survive. She was so pitifully burned.
One of the assistants looked in the box and actually broke down in tears looking at these animals. At that point, I started to almost start crying at that point, and I was like, oh, don't start crying now, please.
Veterinarian Larry Cohen was called in to examine the cats.
We were shocked at her appearance. All the fur off of her face was actually gone. Her whiskers were gone. Her eyelids were burned. Her eyelashes again were gone. I had never seen a cat that badly burned.
It seemed impossible that the mother would survive these horrible injuries, and without the mother, there was little hope for the kittens. But after what the mother had gone through, they decided to do everything they could to save them all.
This cat was a true heroine. With true grit and determination, she made it through. She had actually saved her family without even thinking about her own life.
One kitten didn't survive, but Scarlett and the remaining 4 kittens just wouldn't give up. Marge placed a call to just one local news organization, and before long, the story of Scarlett's bravery spread around the world.
Every time I came to work, there were calls from Johannesburg, Africa, from Paris, from London. All over the world, people wanted to know, how was this famous cat? How were the kittens? When would they be adopted?
After several months of treatment, Scarlett and her kittens were ready for adoption. Out of thousands of applicants, 2 were chosen to take the kittens, but the mother would need special care, so a very special person was chosen to take care of Scarlett.
I was very lucky to end up with Scarlett. She had this incredibly intelligent look, and I thought she was so brave and she was so strong and loving. This is the kind of cat that I wanted in my life.
Karen Wellen had been injured in a car accident and was also recovering. She found the cat a source of inspiration, and Scarlett, for the first time ever, had a home.
I look at what she's come through and I think, well, you know, I'll get through it.
Perhaps the reason her story captured hearts the world over is that Scarlett shows us what's in the best of us. She reminds us of the selfless power of a mother's love.
I would say the symbol of Scarlett is being brave, never giving up, you know, and just doing what she thought that she had to do.
Coming up next, 2 men capsize and are about to be washed into the ice-cold ocean. Their only hope rests on their dog and her 3 legs.
We want to share your miraculous stories. Visit us online at www.animalmiracles.tv.
Many people look for perfection in the things around them, the perfect house, the perfect car, the perfect pet. In our next story, we'll meet two men who owe their lives to a less than perfect dog. It is proof again that every life, no matter how challenged, has the power to deliver miracles.
When Sean Lingle got a Labrador Retriever to take duck hunting on a remote river flowing into the Pacific Ocean, he was most worried about the possibility of losing a duck. He never thought he would risk losing his life.
Where I hunt, I mean, it would really bother me to shoot a duck and not be able to retrieve it and lose it. I mean, that's a real shame. So I mean, you have a good dog like that, and you never lose one.
Sean worked hard to make sure his new dog Tia was a good retriever. She was a natural. She loved the water, and she also loved Sean's family, making her the perfect combination of hunting companion and family pet.
My two daughters, they'd climb all over her and pull her hair and her ears and her whiskers, and she just loved it. She just loved being around kids.
But Tia's idyllic existence was interrupted by a seemingly minor accident. To burn off her boundless energy, Sean often took her running for some extra exercise.
And being a water dog, if there was water there, she was going to be in it. And there was a ditch there along the edge of the road, and she was running through there.
On this day, Tia's daily run ended in disaster. A broken bottle, thoughtlessly tossed from a passing vehicle, lay hidden in the murky water, and Tia ran right over it.
I didn't notice the cut was there until I got home. We bandaged it up as best we could, and unfortunately it got infected.
The infection in her paw spread up her leg, and soon amputation became the only way to save her life. Knowing nothing about living life with a serious handicap, Sean wondered if Tia could be happy.
I didn't want to see her suffer, so I really honestly thought about putting her down. At the same time, I mean, that was a tough decision.
But the veterinarian assured him that dogs could adapt well to life on three legs, so Sean resolved to do everything he could to save her life. The vet was right. Tia came home from the hospital as happy a dog on three legs as she had ever been on four. Sean was astonished.
She got around just great. She ran up the stairs, and we had to slow her down. I almost had to tie her down. Immediately, as soon as we got home, first thing she did was grab a stick and wanted me to throw the stick.
Later in the year, Sean even had Tia back in the field, hunting with him and his brother-in-law, Danny Parker.
It was hard actually to tell that she had one leg missing, believe it or not.
On this cold winter day, when the two friends took Tia duck hunting out on the river, Tia would have a chance to prove herself more than worthy of the faith Sean had placed in her.
And we have a little 8-foot dinghy with the double layer. There's a trapped air between the layers, so it's actually unsinkable. They say it's unsinkable.
But as they dragged the small boat across the rough terrain, they unknowingly tore a hole in the hull. At first, as they headed far out into the river, the pair didn't notice anything was wrong.
Yeah, actually, it's just fairly low in the water, that boat anyways, so especially with two guys and a dog in there, so it was pretty tight quarters.
We were about halfway across when we noticed that it was starting to list to one side.
The boat was dangerously low in the water, and as its hollow hull filled, it became increasingly unstable.
And that's what I said to Danny, maybe we should head back, something's wrong.
But it was too late. As they tried to turn around, the boat flipped, tossing them into the freezing water.
It all happened so quick. I just knew that we had to hang on to the boat. My first thought was, where's Tia?
Tia! Tia!
Because the boat flipped over so quick, I kind of figured that she was stuck underneath there, and I couldn't see her, so I just reached underneath, and I could feel her right away. And I don't know what I grabbed, but I just grabbed onto her hair and just pulled, and she popped up. Big smile on her face.
Sean knew his water-loving dog would make it back to shore safely, but began to fear for himself.
I had always heard that falling water chest waders fill up. It turns you actually upside down. And I remember that going through my mind. I didn't want that to happen, so we were hanging onto the side of the boat.
The impossible task of keeping the icy water out of their chest waders wasn't Sean's only worry. As they struggled to stay above water, the river's current was rapidly carrying them out, towards the open ocean.
This is the Pacific Ocean. I mean, it's cold and it was very windy. It's hard to say what could have happened.
Within 15 minutes, hypothermia would set in. Fighting against time and current, Sean and Danny clung to the boat, kicking as best they could. But their heavy clothes made it impossible to make progress toward the shore. If they took them off, they would succumb even sooner to the bitter cold. At that critical moment, Tia did a miraculous thing. Already halfway to shore and safety, the three-legged dog saw that Sean was not following. She turned around and headed back. Somehow she knew that this time her job was to retrieve him.
And I looked up front, and Tia had the mooring rope, which was tied to the front of the boat, in her mouth, and pulling us as hard as she could to shore.
And then when we both got on it, she was still pulling at us, like, totally amazed us. She towed the boat upside down with both of us hanging off. I couldn't believe it. A dog wouldn't even think to do that.
Swimming mightily with only 3 legs, Tia slowly pulled the 2 men toward the shore.
I never trained her to pull on the mooring rope. I mean, it's just something that came, she realized we were in trouble and she was just going to help.
Finally, they reached shore. Sean and Danny could hardly believe what their brave dog had done.
After it happened, we weren't even going to tell anyone because no one's going to believe us that our dog came back and saved us.
I guess we should call her Wonder Dog. I mean, she's only got 3 legs, and yet, I mean, it's like she was like a little tugboat. That's what we'll have to call her, Tugboat Tia.
Tia lived many more years, a proud and happy member of Sean's family, until the ripe old age of 14.
I buried her just inside the forest, just probably 200 feet, 300 feet from where we launch our boat. I thought it was kind of a special thing, so that's why I buried her there.
Every year when Sean returns to the river, it's never Tia's handicap that he thinks about. What he remembers most is her actions that day, how she miraculously pulled them to safety. He remembers her courage, her strength, and her intelligence in the face of overwhelming obstacles. To Sean, his 3-legged Tia was absolutely perfect.
I couldn't replace her as a dog. She was one of those special dogs that you get once in a lifetime.
Next, a young mother's suburban paradise is threatened when the family dog finds a deadly water moccasin.
When the snake had lunged at us, it was like my whole life flashed before my eyes.
Animal miracles will continue.
You know, for thousands of years, humans have relied on dogs for protection. Well, you can imagine how important they were in the past when most of us lived in the country or on farms. Well, today many of us find ourselves living comfortably in the city. But in this story, we find out that the power of a family dog to protect us is as strong and miraculous now as it ever was.
Valerie Humphreys always imagined her suburban home in Fayetteville, Georgia, to be a safe place to raise her children, well protected from the primal terrors of the wild. But as much as we try to keep out the wilderness around us, sometimes a little sliver of it manages to slip back in. 2 years earlier, Valerie's husband, Daryl, brought home a new puppy. She was not happy about it. Dixie was a pit bull.
Lots of energy, too. Oh, look at that. Come on.
Daryl was the one who wanted the pit bull, and it took him months of convincing to convince me to get one because I had heard so many things about pit bulls. I'd never been around one, and I really wasn't happy with what I'd heard.
Valerie's 10-year-old son, Frank, had his concerns too.
When I knew I was gonna get a puppy pit bull, I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna get bit or something.
The puppy won over the kids pretty easily, but all the negative publicity about pit bulls made Valerie wonder, would Dixie be a safe pet for her 3 small children? But their veterinarian, Fran Tyler, was all for it.
What you read in the newspapers, that's not right. Those pit bulls are the result of bad parents. They are fabulous, and I honestly, I feel that those are one of the best breeds you can have, especially with kids, because they are very loyal.
For the next 2 years, Dixie charmed her way into the Humphreys family fold. She even made friends with Georgia, the family beagle. Valerie remained cautious, but Dixie was always as gentle as a dog could be.
As she got bigger, I kept watching, and she just never, ever showed anything but love for the family.
Then one day in July of 1999, when her husband was out of town, Valerie's family paradise was invaded by a poisonous snake.
I was cleaning the house. It was a, summer vacation day, typical. The kids were up, running around, playing, doing whatever.
The snake settled momentarily on the grill as the children played nearby. Nobody knew the danger the kids were in until Dixie was let out.
And Dixie started barking repeatedly. We went to see what was wrong. She's sniffing our grill. Mom? Mom?
And the kids came running and telling us that Dixie had found a snake. I didn't think anything of it much. They'd been finding turtles in the backyard for weeks. So I went outside, and by then the snake had come out from under the grill.
Look, there it is.
Valerie froze. She suddenly realized her children were facing one of the most poisonous snakes in the U.S., a water moccasin.
A bite from a water moccasin, that's very serious. That's life-threatening. That's an emergency. You need to get to a hospital right away. In a smaller person, I could imagine, that could kill it on the spot.
The first thing in my mind was to get the kids and the dogs back in the house. The next thing on my mind was to kill it.
Valerie grabbed an axe, but as she approached the snake, it coiled to strike. At the back door window, Frank, Cody, and Katie strained to see their mother.
I was worried about my mom and worried about what was happening, what was going to happen.
I was trying to kill it. It was also trying to strike me. So I guess you'd almost have to picture a dance, so to speak. I would strike and it would lunge, and we just kind of moved across the porch.
It was very awful. I thought something bad, really bad was going to happen.
Mom, come inside! Frank, get back in the house now!
I opened the door because when my mom was out there by herself and my dad isn't home and I'm the man of the house. When I saw the snake, I was freaking out.
Afraid for his mother, Frank went back outside with his brother Cody right behind him. Valerie watched in horror as the lethal snake whipped his head towards the boys, poised to strike.
I started screaming, telling them to get back in the house.
But it was too late.
When the snake had lunged at us, it was like my whole life flashed before my eyes.
In an instant, Dixie leapt in front of the boys, pushing them out of harm's way.
She pushed the boys back. She knew there was danger. And all Dixie knew, she had to stop the snake. That was a threat. She immediately grabbed a hold of the snake, and I first heard her yelp, and that's when I realized she'd been bit. And so I swung the axe trying to get the snake, and when the snake turned toward me, she again jumped at the snake.
Then the water moccasin lunged at Dixie a second time.
I saw Dixie try to wrestle the snake, tried to protect us. She took 2 bites from the snake for us.
When she got bit the second time, she backed off. That's when I was able to at least get a good swing in to where the snake laid still.
Dixie?
It was absolute horror. The first thing I did was grab a hold of Dixie and settle her down. and check her out.
Dixie had been bitten in the face, one puncture wound dangerously close to her eye. Valerie rushed Dixie to the vet. Dr. Tyler went straight to work.
This was a venomous snake, and who knows how exactly Dixie was going to respond. So we were dealing with a critical situation, an emergency.
With the poisonous venom coursing through her system, Dixie's life was in the balance. Dr. Tyler administered anti-venom to the courageous dog. All there was left to do was wait and pray for a miracle. Pray that their beloved Dixie would survive.
The kids were just in panic. They had been crying. They didn't know what was going on.
Dixie spent several days in the hospital, and when she came back, she showed no signs of her mortal battle with the snake. She was her spirited, playful self.
With Dixie, we got lucky. I was anticipating serious tissue loss from the nose and her face area, but we got incredibly lucky with her.
Dixie was also inducted into the Georgia Animal Hall of Fame and won the Hero Animal of the Year award for putting her life on the line when the water moccasin threatened her family. Her fearless attack prevented anyone else from being seriously injured.
Dixie saved my children's lives. There's just no doubt in my mind what she did for us.
She's more than a buddy. She's a pal. Dixie's always in my heart. She'll never leave. There's a special place for her.
Coming up next on Animal Miracles.
That looks like it could be cancerous.
A biopsy comes back clear, and he forgets all about it. Then a colleague with a police dog suggests an experimental new procedure.
You want me to come over there and have a dog sniff me over for cancer?
He agrees, but would the dog find something that the doctor couldn't?
Of all the diseases that impact our lives, cancer may be the most insidious. It affects millions of North American families and can strike people of every age. We all look forward to miracles in medical treatments for cancer. And in our next story, we'll meet a team who have discovered a remarkable breakthrough right under someone's nose.
Tallahassee, Florida. Police officer Eddie Messer has lived his entire life here in the Sunshine State, mostly unconcerned about the potentially devastating effects of the sun's rays.
As a kid, I stayed in the sun all the time, run around without a shirt on, just bathing suit, and really enjoyed myself. But we never had no suntan lotion or anything like that on, because I guess that was something boys didn't do.
But the years of exposure to Florida's intense sunshine eventually caught up to Eddie.
Back in early '94, I was working out in the police gym when one of the officers told me, he said, "Hey, you got a spot on your back you need looking at."
What is that thing on your back, Eddie?
That thing? That's my birthmark.
I'd get that checked out. It could be cancerous.
I didn't think much of it.
Well, I'm a little concerned about this lesion, Ed.
Eddie's doctor took a biopsy. He was concerned that it might be melanoma, the deadliest type of skin cancer.
Yeah, my friend thought it should be looked at.
We'll get the results back in about a week.
To Eddie's relief, the biopsy came back negative and he forgot all about it.
I'll let you know when the results come in.
But 1 week later, Eddie received a call from fellow police officer Dwayne Pickle, an expert dog handler.
Hi, Dwayne.
Dwayne explained that he was participating in an experiment. He was attempting to retrain his police dog, a standard schnauzer named George, to see if it was possible for the dog to smell melanoma.
You gotta be kidding.
Doctor came to me and he says, can you train a dog? Do you think you can train a dog to find cancer? I said, well, I'm a dog trainer, not a doctor. So, and I said, I can train a dog to find anything that smells different than its surrounding environment. And if cancer smells different than the skin that surrounds it, we can train a dog to find it.
Dwayne's dog George was used to sniffing for a living. For years, he and Dwayne had worked as partners on the bomb squad. As a bomb detection dog, George was already highly trained in scent work, able to distinguish 16 different chemicals used in explosives. Dr. Jim Walker is a scientist who studies olfactory systems, the sense of smell, at Florida State University in Tallahassee.
We use the dog olfactory system to decide if presidents can get on airplanes, where landmines are buried, where unexploded ordnances are. We use dogs to detect drugs, so it makes sense to understand a lot more about the limits of the dog olfactory system so that we can use them even more.
Basically, this cancer program is the exact same thing as bomb work or drug work, just a different name, but the same game. And George was very good at what he did, and he loved it.
You want me to come over there and have a dog sniff me over for cancer? Well, there's no point now.
Since it already come back and it wasn't positive, I didn't figure it was any use to doing anything like that. So I said, no, I don't think so. I'm not too interested in that.
But Dwayne persisted. Eddie and his wife were skeptical, to say the least.
My wife told me, she said, Ed, you better leave them people alone. They're a bunch of quacks. You just stay away from them.
Eddie would have dismissed the idea, except that he knew Dwayne, and he knew Dwayne could train George to find anything, if it could be found at all. A few days later, Eddie went to give it a shot.
Well, basically, we have a table that looks like a gingerbread man. So hold your arms and your legs apart so the dog can search every part of your body. And I start the dog at the head, and he goes around the body counterclockwise.
Dwayne placed bandages on the body so the dog would not react to any visual cues. As George went to work, Eddie wondered if this bordered on the ridiculous.
When the dog was sniffing around me, his nose tickling me on the thing, I said, look at here, I must be cracking up. Getting too old, I guess.
Then George sat down, his signal to Dwayne that he smelled melanoma. On command, George showed his trainer where he smelled the cancer by putting his paw on Eddie's back. It was the exact spot where the biopsy had been taken.
And it got me a little nervous then, when he hit that spot and he puts his paw on you. That's such sensation that you don't want to really have, because well, maybe it is cancerous,
Now worried, Eddie returned to his doctor for another biopsy, but once again, it came back negative.
I think the dog made a mistake.
Everyone was certain that George was wrong, except Dwayne.
My life has been dependent on a dog for over 30 years that I worked in government. So they've done really a good job on taking care of me.
In all the years of sensitive bomb work, George's nose had never let Dwayne down.
So the dog doesn't make a mistake. The dog says melanoma, it's melanoma.
Dwayne was so certain that his dog was right that he pleaded with Eddie to have his skin tested a third time. Eddie relented and agreed to do it just once more.
We sent it to a pathologist, paid a pathologist to tear this lesion apart one cell at a time until he finished it. 4.5 days later, which cost a lot of money, he found that it was amelanoma level 3. And so if he'd have waited another year, Eddie Messer would be dead.
George was able to detect quantities of cancerous cells so small and deeply embedded that even standard scientific tests couldn't find them.
If it hadn't been for the dog, I probably wouldn't be here today.
Thanks to the unusually early detection, all of Eddie's melanoma was surgically removed before it had any chance of spreading. George lived and worked with Dwayne until the age of 11 and a half. He has left an incredible legacy. Until now, the initial diagnosis of melanoma has relied primarily on visual cues. But now, George's nose has proved that dogs can detect diseases by smell, and that could save lives.
We just did testing and testing and testing, and out of all the testing we did, 451 searches with George, his accuracy rate was 99.7%.
You get a better diagnosis by doing both the visual and doing some chemical sampling. It just happens that in this case, the chemical sampling was done by a tool that we've used for many years, the olfactory system of the dog.
Thanks to George's incredible skill and Dwayne's unshakable faith in his dog's abilities, Eddie is alive and well today and looks forward to many years to come with his family and his own best friend, Princess.
Since then, I hadn't had any occurrence. Let me say this, it was probably a miracle that I went ahead and tried their experiment. And with God's help, the dogs found the melanoma and saw me through it.
The terrible fire in our next story is the work of an arsonist. But we are not helpless in the face of these criminals. We have Onyx, the arson dog. All on her own, she miraculously discovers a new crime-fighting technique that puts arsonists behind bars.
A dog's sense of smell is thought to be 1,000 times better than a person's. It's no wonder we've taken advantage of this gift in hunting and in rescue and police work. For the police and fire personnel in our next story, the talents of one special dog go far beyond the understood. They are quite clearly miraculous.
This lovable old lab doesn't look too formidable today, but in her prime, she was an arsonist's worst nightmare. Onyx was trained to identify the scent left by the gasoline or other accelerants arsonists use to set buildings on fire. But Onyx was so smart, she even knew something her handler John Hudak hadn't taught her, something that would put arsonists behind bars and help make her the best arson dog in America. John and Onyx normally worked fires long after they had died down, when it was safe to investigate. But during this fire in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, 4 firefighters were injured. So John heard about it and arrived unusually early, while the fire was still blazing.
The front of the building had collapsed on the firemen. This structure went up very quickly.
If it was arson, it was even possible that the perpetrator was there, safe in the crowd, as the firefighters risked their lives.
In a lot of cases, the arsonist will stay at the fire scene to watch his work. Some of them get a thrill out of it. Others just want to see what happens. They want the excitement of being at the scene.
Arson is one of the most destructive crimes. Deliberately set fires not only destroy countless millions of dollars of property every year, but they also take hundreds of lives, usually firefighters. Unfortunately, it's a difficult crime to detect and an even harder one to prove. That's where Onyx comes in, and she truly loved what she did. John was waiting to talk with the firefighters when they were done. Perhaps they could tell him where the fire started, so he would know where Onyx should start looking for evidence.
Onyx was always willing to go to work. It didn't matter what time of day it was, what time of year it was, whether it was warm, cold.
What Onyx was about to do went far beyond her job description and would forever change the way dogs are used in arson investigations. But until she was commanded to work, she was just a regular dog that didn't want to be left alone.
I took her out of the van and was walking her around on a leash just to talk to the fire chief.
Just by chance, one of the bystanders came over to pat Onyx. John didn't mind. She usually liked the attention. But Onyx did something that had never happened before.
This one gentleman came over and started asking me questions, and Onyx alerts immediately on his shoe.
John was surprised and at first didn't understand.
Her commands are seek and show me. Let's go to work. Okay, and then, you know, and these commands were not given to her.
But Onyx was trying to tell John something.
I had watched her smell this guy, but I wasn't expecting her to sit down and alert.
You don't work around accelerants or gas or anything, do you?
And when she sat and just looked up at me and says, "Dad, I want some food," we got a problem here. She actually identified the person, and I wanted to know why.
John's heart raced as he realized what this meant, but he had to be sure it wasn't a mistake.
And I asked him, "Were you around gasoline? Were you handling gasoline?" And he said, "No, he hasn't." And I waited a few minutes and got the police aside and says, I think you ought to talk to this guy. The police were sort of surprised and shocked. They said, you know, why? I said, well, Onyx alerted on their clothing. That tells me there could be an accelerant on their clothing. And that's when they started talking to them.
Excuse me, can I have a word with you?
After being taken to the police station, he confessed to the crime.
This was the first time ever that an arson detection dog had actually picked out the arsonist at the scene of a fire. And Onyx had done it all on her own, with no instructions from John.
She was not given the command to go to work. She went to work on her own.
A few months later, at another fire, she would do it again, and a powerful new crime-fighting technique was born.
I think Onyx's miracle is that she was able to identify suspects without being asked to do so or told to do so.
Onyx soon became the country's most famous arson dog, responsible for one of the highest conviction rates and the only dog chosen to investigate the massive fire at the Branch Davidian complex at Waco, Texas.
We worked the compound for 7 days. She identified 100 areas where there was an accelerant.
When there were no fires to investigate, John often took her out into the community to demonstrate their work.
I'm going to take a little bit of accelerant, just a couple of drops. Okay.
We found that the best way to show her off was to do people searches.
It was only for fun, but Onyx never failed to find the shoe with the gasoline.
Gotcha.
After 5 years of brilliant work, Onyx retired and was saluted across the country.
Decorated dog is retiring from service. Bruce Puppy.
Onyx had a hip problem and needed to stay home, and that broke her heart.
Onyx had a hard time adjusting to retirement. She was used to going out with me every morning when I'd go to work, and now I'd go out the door and leave her behind, and she found that very difficult to take for several months. I was used to having her beside me, in the car with me, at my desk, and suddenly she's not there, and it was very difficult.
But John found something to make her happy. Onyx still likes to show off her skills, and even though today it's only for fun, she still works with the same enthusiasm she had when she was the star of the Allegheny County Arson Squad.
Even today, I mean, it's 7 years later from when she was working. You walk into the house, she'll check you out.
And although she'll never investigate another fire, America's top arson dog will always be remembered.
I had a partner that was always with me. I believe Onyx was good at it because she enjoyed being with people and wanted to please everybody that she was with. She just would work her heart out for you.
That's it for today. We hope you've enjoyed our miraculous animal stories, stories of love and compassion, stories that remind us of what it means to share the planet with others. If you have an animal miracle, visit us online. I'm Alan Thicke, and we'll see you next time.